Haha, Cree. Religious psychosis. Psychosis. Yeah. Accompanied by this completely unsettling, roach-like chirping sound. Literally, that is the exact auditory nightmare our protagonist Toivo wakes up to. Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we are diving into a piece of source material that is it's as violently chaotic as it is psychologically terrifying. We're going to map out this incredibly dense, surreal survival scenario. And let me tell you, it pulls absolutely no punches.
So, Descent and Rescue, a cinematic breakdown. The text we're analyzing today is this wild, almost hallucinatory mashup. It perfectly blends claustrophobic medical horror with high-octane, occult science fiction. And you know what's really fascinating here? It's how rapidly the story swings between total psychological helplessness and explosive, hyper-violent agency. So, let's unpack exactly what goes down in this bizarre nightmare together.
Okay, part one, the captivity, the Vladivostok nightmare. We kick things off with our protagonist, Toivo, slowly fading into consciousness, and he finds himself inside a claustrophobic, roach-infested, padded room. He's bound tight in a straitjacket. Looking through an armored door, he spots this massive, hooded figure, but the faces inside that hood? They're made of roaches. Slimy insects actually start crawling up his pant legs and right inside his shirt. It's just a visceral, immediate assault on the senses. Then, out of nowhere, a voice rings out, commanding the Black Angels to fetch the patient for an acid bath. The door swings open, and in walk these Black Angels. But get this, they aren't your traditional monsters. They're dressed super sharply in black tuxedos. The catch? Their eyes are just pitch-black voids. Without even a second of hesitation, these figures shoot Toivo right in the chest with a stun gun, violently blurring his vision and dragging him deeper into the facility's madness.
This thrusts us right into a really harrowing sequence of medical horror. Toivo keeps drifting in and out of this hazy, half-dream state. Surgeons are actively operating on his head. They're probing his lungs with tubes. And when Toivo gags and spits on one of the doctor's masks, the doctor literally hisses at him like a snake, waves a surgical scalpel right in front of Toivo's nose, and delivers this terrifying threat. Just a little pressure with this, and I can end your days. Right after that, the doctor just taps him on the forehead with a metal hammer, sending Toivo plunging straight back into darkness.
When the darkness finally lifts, the true, horrifying nature of his surroundings is revealed. He's in the Vladivostok facility. He wakes up tied to a chair, with this blindingly bright light shining in his one healthy eye. And he's entirely surrounded by mirrors. But behind those mirrors, doctors and researchers are actively watching him. Suddenly, this deep, booming voice echoes from a microphone on the ceiling, laughing and officially welcoming him to Vladivostok. And the voice drops a massive bombshell. They, the Black Ones as they're called, have installed a microchip in Toivo's brain. They claim he's a unique test subject and a perfect fit. I mean, the psychological terror here is just absolute.
But right when things seem utterly hopeless, the narrative violently rips us right out of that chair, moving into the next chapter. The assault, the Black Pyramid. Through a sudden, jarring vision, Toivo actually sees the exterior of the very building he's currently trapped inside.
And you know, the contrast here is really the driving engine of the whole story. On one side, you've got Toivo's reality inside the pyramid, right? Straitjackets, scalpels, and just total helpless psychological terror. But outside, we get a look at Angel Face's reality. Now, Angel Face is actually Toivo's mother, and she is rolling up leading a literal cavalry of white Humvees. Her reality is defined by explosive projectiles, heavy weaponry, and this hyper-violent agency. The juxtaposition of that silent, mirrored torture room inside against the deafening, explosive battlefield outside, it's just incredible.
And wow, the battlefield is swarming with threats that are every bit as bizarre as those Black Angels we saw earlier. I'm talking about the hairy demons. The courtyard is an absolute zone of chaos. Right out of the ground, these black, drooling velociraptors are emerging, and they're being ridden by creatures draped in black robes. Meanwhile, charging out from the surrounding forest, you've got these hairy demons that are literally pulsating with a red light. It is a full-blown occult sci-fi nightmare brought to life.
To really wrap our heads around the sheer density of this courtyard battle, we got to look at the timeline. It is wild. At 0 seconds, the Humvee cavalry arrives. Barely 15 seconds in, boom, drooling velociraptors burst from the earth. By the 30-second mark, a Black Angel lobs an explosive projectile. Angel Face manages to destroy it with an electric bolt, but black acid splashes on her arm and it instantly melts it. And at 45 seconds, Angel Face calls down literal space lasers from orbit to obliterate the pulsating hairy demons. The pacing here is just relentless.
Which brings us to the downright bizarre arsenal deployed in this text. We've got stun guns and occult microchips over on the facilities side, but Angel Face's crew, they bring curved swords covered in weird symbols. Swords that are actually combined with rifles, by the way. We have the orbital lasers we just mentioned, which she calls down by pressing a button on her shoulder labeled 12 Disciples. But honestly, the most intense use of this arsenal happens right after Angel Face's arm gets melted by that acid. Without even blinking, she uses her own weapon to slice her melted arm completely off, and then she cauterizes the stump with a blue flame. I mean, talk about a staggering display of grit, right?
With the courtyard finally cleared out, we transition into the next phase, the infiltration, specifically breaching occult security. Angel Face actually decapitates a guard, uses his biometric data, and the massive doors at this Black Pyramid just open up like a giant toothy maw.
But breaching the door is literally only step one. The second they step foot inside, the rescue squad is confronted by these possessed, slithering nurses and doctors. The medical staff of this occult facility have clearly been twisted into something completely inhuman. Luckily, a squad member named John steps up to the plate and rapidly roasts these slithering horrors with a flamethrower, clearing the entryway for the rest of the team.
So how exactly do they get down to Toivo? Let's trace John's infiltration path. Step 1, roast the possessed doctors, which, check, he just did. Step 2, he spots a map on the wall. But of course, this is a horror story, so the map is horrifyingly made out of human skin. He uses it to locate the facility's Black Heart. Step 3, leaving the others behind to tend to Angel Face, John takes an elevator deep down into the depths. And to bypass the elevator's occult security lock, he actually has to use blood from a severed arm. As the elevator plummets into the Black Heart of the facility, John drops to his knees and prays to Jesus that Toivo is still safe.
And that brings us right to the climax of our explainer, the extraction, the blood room escape. We snap right back to Toivo's perspective, still trapped inside that mirrored room, as a blaring red general alarm suddenly goes off.
At this point, the horror reaches its absolute peak. The facility knows it's under attack, and the systems inside Toivo's room are reacting violently to the breach. Out of nowhere, the medical staff surrounding him begins to twitch uncontrollably. Then, the room starts filling with red blood. It's just pouring uncontrollably out of these holes in the walls. The blood rapidly rises, entirely flooding the floor until it reaches Toivo's knees. It's this suffocating, completely surreal nightmare scenario.
Just as the blood threatens to totally overtake him, a massive bang echoed. John has made it to the bottom. He blasts the door of the mirrored room wide open, and the glass shatters violently inward. That knee-high sea of blood immediately gushes out into the hallway. Toivo's consciousness begins to fade out again, and his final terrifying memory of the room is the sight of the facility's burned doctors howling in absolute agony as the rescue squad completely overtakes them.
And then, finally, peace. Well, okay, a violent sort of peace. Toivo wakes up bounding along in the back of a Humvee. He's safely resting in Angel Face's lap. He looks up at her and asks, "Mother, are you wounded?" And despite her freshly amputated arm, she just gives him this angel smile through the agonizing pain. She tells him to hush and then gently injects a sleep medicine right into his neck, finally letting him get some safe rest.
But as we wrap up this explainer, we really have to look back at the very beginning and ask ourselves, was this a miraculous, action-packed rescue from a literal, occult, cyberpunk facility? Or was this entire hyper-violent epic just the terrifying hallucination of a religious psychosis? The source text leaves it entirely ambiguous, and honestly, that ambiguity is exactly what makes it so incredibly fascinating. Thank you so much for joining me on this breakdown. Think about those two realities, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.